first thing we're going to do with our new landing site is to use it to engage in some off-world trade. But before that we can do that, we need to understand how stockpiles work. Stockpiles are basically special areas where colonists deposit items that they're not using. So newly manufactured items that haven't yet been designated for a purpose are moved to stockpiles. Ores that are extracted from the ground, grains that are harvested, they're all moved to stockpiles and stored there so that they can be used in later activities. The mechanics for managing stockpiles are pretty simple. There's a tool here in the toolbar that looks like a couple of crates. If you click on that, that's the stockpile tool. And then you can go ahead and click anywhere in the world where you'd like to create or delete stockpiles. This will bring up the Manage Stockpiles interface, which is, again, pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. What you have here is a list of all the different item categories that exist in Outer Colony, and stockpiles can be used to contain only certain item categories that you want. So if I want to create a stockpile where all of my colonists can put just ammunition and firearms, I would go ahead and hold down Control and then left-click to multi-select, just like you would in any control. And I would leave the Set Stockpile Item Categories option selected, thereby creating a stockpile to support these item categories. When I click OK, the stockpile is created. You can also use the stockpile tool to delete stockpiles. So I've got it selected here. I'll click on this stockpile, and instead I will click Remove Stockpile Item Categories, and I'll click Ammunition and Firearms. And then when I click OK again, the stockpile will be removed because there are no items in it. If you remove designations from a stockpile that exists, orders will automatically be created to transfer items in that stockpile over to other stockpiles that can support the appropriate categories. Now, before we can engage in trade, we have to make a special kind of stockpile. So I'll select the stockpile tool again, and then near my landing site, I'm going to click here, and I will leave this check to set stockpile item categories. I'll say all so that anything can be put in here. And I'm going to click this box that says Trade Designated Stockpile. The difference between a Trade Designated Stockpile and a normal stockpile is that Trade Designated Stockpiles contain items that have been designated for trade purposes only. So before you engage in trade, you're going to move items to these stockpiles, and colonists know not to pick up and use those items because they're going to be used in trade exchanges. So I'll go ahead and click OK, create that Trade Designated Stockpile, and we're good to go. Now, one other thing that you can do with stockpiles is if you click on the Inspect Tile tool and then click on a stockpile, you see that you can view stockpile details to see the sorts of items in there. So if I click on this stockpile, for example, and I view stockpile details, I can see this contains coal, bottled water, lots of ammunition, and things like that. And you can check out the items in them. Another thing that you can do using the inspection tool on a stockpile is click on the Designate Items for Stockpile button. This lets you specify items that you want to be moved directly to this stockpile. So in this case, I'm going to click on the stockpile, and I'm going to move 120,000 units of bauxite, which is an ore that yields aluminum. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move a further 500,000 units of anthracite coal. And these items will be moved to our Trade Designated Stockpile. So I'll go ahead and click OK there, and then I'll click OK again, and then orders will be created to move the coal and bauxite to the stockpile. So when I unpause the game, some workers should take care of business. They will retrieve the items and move them to where we want them to be. So the coal has been moved. We've got a worker going ahead over here, grabbing the bauxite. He'll take it over. And we've got our coal and bauxite present. So now we have items in our trade stockpile, which means that our colonists will not use the items in here for any purposes, and we can use them for trade, which we're going to do in the next step. So the next part of the tutorial series, when you click the next button, will cover how to trade off-world to get various items that we can't build or haven't yet built in our colony ourselves.